Hi everyone, this is going to be a shorter care guide, but today everyone here will learn how to care for the crested gecko. Okay, so crested geckos are an arboreal species, or semi-arboreal sometimes, depending on the specimen. This is my own crested gecko, Charlie. I have Charizard too. She's in that tub right there. Before you keep them in tubs, you have to know that you have to drill ventilation holes. So, but crested geckos are very easy if you want a low maintenance gecko that doesn't need insects all the time. You can get away without ever feeding them insects if you have crested gecko diets with protein in them. But things like Pangea and Rapashi and a few other less popular diets work well too. But if you start out, then I just recommend you do Pangea and Rapashi. It's pretty inexpensive. As you can see here, this is a crested gecko. You can include live plants and or fake plants in their enclosure. For the bare minimum size for the enclosure is very highly debated. Some people say 18 by 18 by 24. I would recommend that, honestly. This is an 18 by 18 by 18, unless your animal's tailless. Other people often recommend enclosure sizes like 12 by 12 by 18. So if your gecko's tailless, I think the bare minimum should be about around 18 by 18 by 18. I've never seen anyone else say the bare minimum is 18 by 18 by 18, but a lot of people say it's 12 by 12 by 18, and a lot of people say it's 18 by 18 by 24. So I'm just going to go in between there, but I recommend always upgrade your animal. Been keeping them for a long time, especially, because I'm definitely going to upgrade Charlie eventually. That's his name, Charlie. And he will have a much larger enclosure eventually. So they enjoy fake plants, hides, bark. You don't need to make this as elaborate as this. You can just put egg cartons in there too. They eat things like Pangea. They also can eat crickets and dubia roaches and mealworms and such. Mine are not a fan of dubia roaches or mealworms. I've tried, but while we were away, someone else was watching them, and they tried to give them crickets, and that was successful, I believe, because Charlie has grown in weight. So let's talk about the second part, like cage furnishings. We already talked about cage size. I recommend they eat about once every 2 days, once every other day, or something, or every 2 days. Oh crap! Turn to something that's not like. But yeah, every other day to every 2 days. I'll fix that after we're done with the video. But this is Charizard. Her enclosure consists. You can get away with paper towel substrate, but I like a natural substrate like bark, some sort of barks. Here is Charizard. Charizard is sleeping. Charizard loves sleeping. This is a female crested gecko. And they come in all sorts of patterns and color variations. All types of morphs, really. Some common ones are Harlequin, Dalmatian, Flame, Reds, but Reds you'll find for much more expensive usually. But you'll also find rare ones like Xanthics, Lily Whites, and Cappuccinos. There's many morphs. Well, probably the most rare morph is the, they can sometimes be a little skittish, like she is, often when they're a little bit younger. But Charlie is less skittish. In my opinion, they're more skittish when they have their tail because they're more confident about jumping. In my opinion, Charizard still has her tail, but Charlie doesn't. They lose their tails and they do not grow them back, which I'm fine with that since I think tailless geckos do look better than tail geckos for some reason. But that's my opinion, and if you want to buy a tailed gecko, I bought her, and she had a tail, obviously. But they like hiding in things like these. You can just make an enclosure. You just buy a tub this big. This can be suitable for anything up to an adult. They are arboreal. You just put a plant on the side, a few plants in here, fake plants, egg carton. They don't need any extra heat or lighting. UVB is not required, but you can do it. It's something that they might enjoy. 5.0 UVB. They don't need any heat unless you live in a really, really cold, not really, really cold, but like a fairly cold house where it often gets under 75 degrees, like really often. Or if it's winter sometimes. But I've had all of my geckos and snakes from, like, I got my first gecko, Charlie, my first crested gecko, when it was warm out. So I haven't really had the winter problem. My first crested gecko, my first gecko at this house. At my dad's house, I have leopard geckos. But Charizard has a red base. There's a lot of morphs. They're more expensive than leopard gecko morphs. If you want more of an inexpensive gecko for the actual gecko itself, I'd recommend you get a leopard gecko because Brian Bartrook's geckos from BHB are a little bit overpriced in my opinion because he's selling just pinstripes for like $180. Pinstripes is another old morph. None of my geckos are pinstripes, by the way. But the morphs are really cool. Some of them are really amazing. The geckos I have are really amazing. Charlie is a Dalmatian, and Charizard's not a Dalmatian. Charizard's running fast. I'm just gonna end this video. We're gonna make a part 2, definitely, to this care guide. But a tub this size can house anything up to a 1 to 2 breeding pair, in my opinion. But just make sure there's multiple. If you're breeding them and cohabiting them, you should definitely make multiple food and water dishes for each of them. They do drink out of water dishes, but they do also like to be missed once or twice a day. I don't miss Charizard that much just because of just because it's already really humid in here, and I'm gonna miss her in a little bit. But they're really low maintenance. There are rumors, I remember, of them surviving up to 3 months without food. I do not recommend you go over 1 week, especially for a younger one like this. The babies are really small, so you can put them in something like a 6-quart tub, like that. But if you have like a really big breeding pair or anything, or you just want to give them extra space, you can choose either a bigger tub or a fairly large tank. I don't if you do a 12 by 12 by 18, I have some basic guidelines. I do recommend that you have a smaller tailless gecko, about that's under 30 grams. If you do decide to start out, I recommend you always just like upgrade to something about like that size. But they're really active at night, and there's one thing to note about the tubs is that if you do decide to do something like a tub, you won't see them as much. I see Charlie out and about a little bit more, and he's in his tank. So if you want something that's a little bit more cost effective, which do you want more? A beautiful mini jungle or something that's a little bit more cost effective if you want a budget reptile, but you still want it to be a cool reptile, because leopard geckos need heating and such. And if you don't want to feed your snake mice, or if you don't really want to deal with insects that much, crested geckos are great. Mine usually don't even eat insects, so no complaining. But anything just really easy. They eat Pangea. You just mix it with water. Pangea is food for crested geckos and other fruit-eating geckos. If you want something that maybe will look a little bit different, I recommend gargoyle geckos, or I don't have any gargoyle or Chihuahua geckos. But if you want something, if you have crested geckos and such, or something already, and you're just watching this video for an overview, then I recommend, and if you want something a little more with similar care, but it's just a little bit maybe bigger and like harder to care for in some ways, just because sometimes it's fun for a challenge, I recommend like something like a Legionnaires gecko. They're not that hard. My mom isn't the biggest fan of Legionnaires geckos because they look like sock puppets, but I think they're pretty cool. Crested geckos are awesome because there's so many morphs. They're from New Caledonia, fairly tropical environment, but it's still temperate. You won't need to provide that much heat. They eat things. I already said what they eat, but they do enjoy hiding spaces, and they like just like jumping from hand to hand. One of my hands on the phone right now, so I can't really like do that. But you know, like the gecko jumps from one hand to the other. Pretend that plant is my other hand right now. There. Crested geckos don't have eyelids, actually, and this video is getting a little long, I'm noticing. So, Charizard says bye. That's her name, Charizard. She's going to breed to Charlie eventually. No breeding expert. I've never bred crested geckos before, but I think it will be a fun adventure, and it's probably going to be the first reptile that I'm going to breed. Let's just wait until Charizard gets a little bit larger. If you want me to request a breeding video next spring, I can do one, because that's probably when I'm going to get my first clutch. But because we need Charizard to get a little bit bigger breeding size for Charlie. Charlie needs to get a little bit bulkier, but he's working on it, and he's 34 grams when he got to me, who was like 29 grams. Charizard was 20 grams when he got her, but she's like 15 grams now. Update. I haven't done an actual YouTube video post in a long time, but everyone says goodbye, and have an awesome day. Subscribe. Put in the comments below if you are a more experienced gecko keeper, if you have any care or concerns that I'm saying, because, but they're just really awesome. I'm no expert, I'm not claiming to be in any way, but I do believe that I have done a lot of research, and I'm taking care of my animals properly. Breeders of crested geckos, like, saw my setups and they say I was doing it correctly. Breeders were actually the ones who are watching. A breeder of crested geckos were watching mine, but then another breeder delivered it to us because that breeder was feeling sick. So that's the breeder I got my ball python from there, but we can talk about that in another video. Goodbye, have an awesome day, and check out my morph market. Bye, and farewell. New video every week now, actually, too.